So this is a D16 white we're working on. Today we're going to be changing out the guides. So we've already sized our bowl area and did a little work here. Haven't cut the final valve job though. So this is about typical of what we see here. So we're going to look at the clearance here. Kind of an old school way to do it, but as you can see, there's valves wiggling around in there. And the way I was taught is that the intake valve is going to be a little bit bigger than the exhaust. So we'll put the intake in there, and when you do that, it should have almost no movement at all. And this one has some, so this is on the looser end of the spectrum. So something like this would probably be okay if it was just a, slam it together type rebuild, but this customer is going to be boosting on it, so we want to make sure we get the guides right. So this is our carbide pilot, which we cut our valve drops with. So this is our final size for what we're going to size the exhaust up to. So this should be really solid. This is the oversized pilot, so you can see we still have a little bit of movement there, but it's not too bad. But we're going to go ahead and put some bronze SuperTech guides in it anyway. So what happens is, zoom in here, when you have the loose guides, so this super pitted area here, that's your 45, that's the sealing angle. So if the valve is loose, when it's in the motor and spinning some RPM, it's actually going to orbit and walk itself around and peel that 45 angle and roll it in, rather than being a nice defined angle that matches up well and seals into a big blob. And then it's not going to seal. I've seen stuff with really loose guides that obviously it smokes, it peels this angle, it doesn't seal, and then it really, as it's orbiting in there, it's going to wear down the valve stems quite badly, and then it's going to orbit even more. These are bronze guides from SuperTech Performance. The exhaust is the longer of the two. This is the intake. And so these, the inner diameter here, actually comes undersized. So you can size them to your specs. So it's actually a two-part process for us. So if what I've seen a lot of heads that have come through from some other shops that don't necessarily specialize in this kind of work is they will just rough ream the guide and that's it. And so what we've seen is that rather than being, that's terrible, we'll start again, rather than seeing a perfectly straight guide bore, which is what you shoot for, we'll see something like this, which is more of an hourglass shape. So now, rather than having your full oil clearance the whole way here, it gets tighter in the middle. When it's tighter in the middle, although the bronze is a very hard material, if only 10% of the guide is the correct specification, once this wears out, which it will, now it's super loose. And so all the hard work you did replacing the guides and recutting the valve job to make everything nice now goes out the window. And it doesn't take very long for this area to wear down. So the other thing I've seen is we've had some guides that came in that were the opposite. They were more of a barrel shape, like this. So it's kind of the opposite that we've seen here, but when they go and check their sizing with the valve, oh, it feels good, it feels good. But again, once you wear out this top and this bottom, which is a small section, and you will, it's now out of spec again, because it doesn't take very long to wear down just that little bit of material on each side. So the best way we found, this is what we see, if the guides do come undersized a lot, and some shops will just do a hone only, and they'll sit there for 12 hours honing these super hard guides. They usually end up with more of a barrel shape like this. So what we do is we actually have a solid carbide reamer rather than a high-speed steel. And so that kind of will ream it to shape like this. So obviously not super perfect. That sort of finish is rough. It's not going to hold oil very well. And then we actually go back with our diamond hone abrasives for our final size, and it makes it straight and round, nice and smooth, how we like it. I can't really smooth this out by freehand working the camera, but you get the idea. So now our clearance, we do the best we can to make sure this area is universal up and down the whole length of the guide, so that you get the longest life out of them for as long as possible. So why this is so critical, and a lot of shops just kind of graze through it, and you know, most people are ignorant, they don't know what really goes into this type of job. So if this clearance is too loose, you're going to have all the same issues of loose guides. They're going to orbit, they're going to peel your valve job angles away and turn it into a blob rather than seal it, and then it's going to wear your stems really bad. Now if this area is too tight, which a lot of people, oh, it's precision, it's super tight, it has a very low clearance, it's what you want. But we've actually seen, you know, in the turbo stuff or super high heat applications that will actually stick the valve. The valve absorbs so much heat, and it will actually expand enough to get seized within the guide. And then now you just have a valve sticking out, crashing into all stuff, and it turns your piston into a wadded up ball of tinfoil. And I'm sure you can hear him. Here's the shop cat. Hi, Peanut. Yes, I'm doing the valve guide video. Thank you for your help. Now we got the guides pushed out here, and so as you can see, that's about as clean of removal as you're gonna get. Didn't peel any material out. The guide itself looks really clean there. Didn't peel anything out. So if you don't heat these up to the correct temperature and try and press these things out, you're going to peel a bunch of material out of, grab something to point here, out of this area here, this guide bore. And when you do that, it's going to just pull oil through it all day in smoke, and you'll never figure out why until you take it back to the machine shop. And then the only way to fix that is to buy oversized outer diameter guides and then hone them to spec, which is probably going to cost more than your cylinder head's worth. So we're going to throw this thing back in the oven and heat it up again and press the new guides in. Alright, so that's the new ones pressed in. So key here is you got to heat it up to the right temperature to press out the old ones so you get a smooth removal. Then reheat it up and press the new ones back in because they are an interference fit. That means that the guide itself is a larger diameter than the hole it's going into. So you have to freeze the guide and heat up the head. Then you also have to be careful on your temperature. If you get the head too hot, you can warp it. Or when you go to surface it, if it's been heated up way too much, rather than making a nice clean surface, it'll want to peel like cheese. So we're going to cover this up and let it cool down slowly, and that's it. They'll be ready to size. Okay, you guys, so here's an example to look at. So in the previous video I was saying, you know, a lot about, you know, this is a very good guide install because there wasn't any material that got peeled out of it. So this is a B16 head that one of the guys I know had done by another shop. And you can see here where all the aluminum looks like it's built up around the edge of the guide there. So now either this head wasn't the correct temperature or these valve guides were the wrong size. So when these were fitted into the head, they actually pulled this material out of that smooth guide bore area. So that means that inside this, that's going to have a lot of streaks going through it, and that is a direct vacuum leak. So when the engine's running, it's going to pull vacuum from the valve cover area and actually suck oil down through that passage. And the other thing that I noticed when he sent me this, I zoomed in a little bit, is that whatever they did with either the wrong guides or it wasn't the correct temperature, because like I said, these are an interference fit. The guides are actually a larger diameter than the hole they go into. So you have to freeze the guide itself and heat up the head. So it has actually cracked the area here. This is going to be behind the spring pocket, and if you're really porting on one of these heads and remove a lot of material from the roof area, it gets thin. So as a result of it being thin and whatever else they had going wrong, that actually cracked the casting. So not only are you going to have the streaks inside the bore sucking oil in through the valve cover area, but also through these cracks. So you're going to burn a lot of oil, it's going to smoke, the thing's never going to run right. And my brother actually does some cylinder head work as well. He was working on a set of overhead cam Audi heads, and he was actually able to pull vacuum on the intake port with the valve guide, the valve, and the seal on it, and you could actually watch the oil he put around the guide get sucked into the intake port. So I'll pull that up here next. So this is the worst one right here. If I fill it up with WD-40, you can see it all gets sucked away because it goes in through the guide and the cylinder head. It just kind of slowly gets sucked away and down by the valve guide. So the closing thoughts here. I get asked quite a bit, what are some of the symptoms that, my valve guides are loose or should be replaced. So without having the head off the car and taking it apart and being able to actually inspect it, what we've seen in the past is that a car will run pretty decent, except for on really hard deceleration or engine braking, like you're coming up to a corner and you're using the engine to slow down quite a bit. You're going to see a big cloud of smoke out of the back. And kind of other than that, not really smoking a ton, it's probably going to be your valve guides. Whereas if it was your seals that are old and crusty and leaking, or the piston rings are just shot in it, it's going to basically smoke at every RPM, and obviously a lot more at the higher RPMs regardless of what you're doing. So now the final thing I want to touch on is going to be, once you replace the guides, you will have to recut the valve seats, because the geometry has changed slightly. Obviously when you install these and resize them, everything's not going to line up, down to the thousandth of an inch as it was before. So you're going to have to recut the seats, because the seat cutting stuff and where the valve sits, it gets piloted by the valve guide itself. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to send us a message to the Facebook page at facebook.com/badguysworldwide, or to the Instagram at badguys_worldwide, or if you want to check out the store, you can go to badguysonline.com. So if you guys have any questions at all, or you think you need your guides replaced, or this is some kind of work you're looking to get done, just go ahead and shoot a message. Thanks.